Hello to our audience today, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Susarin, and I am a member of Nsashaell system. Here with me, I have two of my friends from other systems. I will allow them to introduce themselves. We are here to talk about things we believe are advantageous to discuss, but are often avoided in conversations about and among plurals. This session has a number of trigger warnings. They are here on the slide, categorized by which part of the presentation they will be encountered. The trigger warnings include self-harm, suicide, in-system violence and threats, discussion of mental health care, and others. Our goal is to begin conversations within and between plurals about these important mental health topics. Only by bringing the darker aspects of our experiences into the light can they be fully understood, addressed, and appreciated. That is why our discussion today is important. However, we remind our listeners to practice selves-care if they become uncomfortable due to the subject. Please do what you all need in order to remain safe should you choose to listen to our session. This session arose through conversations between the three of us about our own experiences. Through our chats, we realized that we are similar in our roles within our systems. In other words, we seem to be of the same type. We have all been considered to be frightening, problematic, and a source of harm by others in our systems. None of our systems use conventional DID language to name headmate roles, but we are all aware of the label Persecutor and of the narrative of the reformed Persecutor. In this narrative, the scary bad person in the system sees the light and becomes a protector instead. We decided retired Persecutor is more accurate for the purposes of this session. So-called persecutor headmates are often dehumanized in therapy, described as projections of abusers or a metaphor for self-hatred. We are here to show that we are people, fully capable of discussing our complex thoughts and feelings on our system roles and our change over time. We are here to allow others like us to hear discussion that may pertain to them, to hear themselves in us. Being an antagonist within your system can be lonely, but you are not alone, and you are allowed to be a person with thoughts, feelings, and opinions just like anyone else. The role of antagonist is vital to any story. We have each prepared some remarks about this topic, which we will now share.
Hello, I am Sukhoija. I belong to New Upsilon Xi, a culturally plural sisterhood, better known as the Sorority. So what does retired persecutor mean to you? I want to preface my answer first. We do not officially use the term persecutor or protector in our system, but for this discussion, I'll use these terms as they're normally understood. To me, being a retired persecutor would mean I do not regret, nor will I atone for what I have done in the past. I have done nothing to apologize for. Nor is it a promise that I will not do it again in the future if needed. The persecute card may no longer be in my hand, but it is still in play. I like to think of persecution like game. You can take the player out of the game, but you can't take the game out of the player. We can change the ways we do things even if we ourselves do not change. This is why I am not the cliche trope of a reformed persecutor turned protector. I prefer to think of myself not as literally retired, but in the same way an idol or VTuber graduates. I've graduated. To me, graduated means that I have found other, less reactionary ways of achieving my goals that don't involve deliberately causing harm. My goals are simple. I value balance in our system above all else. As I said, we don't use traditional plural terms. In our system, we have regulators, responders, and reactors. These are only descriptive roles for how any one of us naturally operates. No one is assigned these roles, and there aren't really any rules. Everyone does what they do in their own way. All of us take part in keeping the system balanced. My sister Hope is the primary regulator and oversees the sustaining of balance in everyday life. My sister Vita is the secondary regulator and maintains balance during periods of energy transition, work to home, sleep to wakefulness, etc. Responders conduct the activities of everyday life and respond to reactors when they react. Reactors are the most powerful members of our sisterhood in terms of intensity and ability to flood or destabilizing our system during a reaction. For the most part, our responders are able to contain and de-escalate any sister reacting to something that sets her off. Depending on how responders respond to any given event, certain of us could be described as persecutors and others as protectors, even though we don't use those terms. Balance is lost when responders are unable to prevent dissociation or other undesirable results caused by a reaction. As I mentioned, our primary and secondary regulators sustain and maintain balance respectively. As the tertiary regulator and primary responder for our sisterhood, I restore balance to the system when it is lost, by any means necessary. To me, restoration of balance is best understood as grounding. The simplest grounding mechanism is pain. Pain is simple, uncomplicated, and returns immediate results. Balance can be restored through pain. There is no clearer signal that you are still in this reality than when reality itself reaches out and you viscerally feel it bringing you back. As they say, pain is the fifth vital sign. Feeling it means you are still alive, you are still real. Pain is the most effective grounding mechanism, and that's not a good thing. It's too easy. Its use for this purpose is lazy, uninspired, and crude. It's bad game. Pain only produces immediate results. Causing pain doesn't address why it was needed in the first place. Pain can also bring new, longer-term problems like scars, medical bills, and justice involvement that further pain can't resolve. It's a quick fix that becomes all too easy to rely on. It's a strategy, but it's a losing strategy. Being a graduated persecutor means using pain is a failure, even if it is effective. If I have an alternative means, I will choose the alternative because using pain is beneath me. Being a graduated persecutor means I'm better than that. I've upped my game. So, what is your relationship with your system now, and how has it been different from the past? In all honesty, it isn't any different. I still do what I do for the system. There are times when my sisters have begged me for pain to ease their suffering, but I enjoy their suffering, and I'm not going to do for them what they could do for themselves. So, what realizations or thought have you had on your own process of retirement? There wasn't really a process of graduation, but I can tell you about a post-grad realization I wouldn't have considered when actively practicing. The realization which stands out most is that I do have my own emotions of no relation, joy, love, hope, compassion, and more that I previously didn't think were there. People like me are capable of all these things just as any other system member, and it changes nothing about us. A shark with the capacity to love is still a shark. How this realization happened will sound strange, and I am not ashamed of it. It was only through my introduction to VTubers, virtual YouTubers, that I was able to access and express these feelings. Because they lack natural facial expressions, VTubers don't require the hypervigilance to detect deception as IRL people do. There are no mirror neurons involved in replicating a stranger's facial expression and conveying emotion. For a persecutor, retired, graduated, or otherwise, encountering someone who doesn't require that hypervigilance is profound. It allows an empathic connection not possible with other people outside our system. The emotions you feel when interacting with them are real because they're coming from within you, not from them. I can express these emotions without fear of being seen as softer or more humane. It doesn't hurt my image. The parasocial relationship puts enough distance between VTubers and myself so I can openly express and show how I feel without any fear anyone will see me and think less of me. And that is why I am thankful VTubers exist. As deep in the fandom as I am, these feelings aren't towards the VTuber. They are from within me and for me. The gachikoi begins and ends with the stream, but when your Oshi's on, the feels are no different. It was through this exploration that we found another sister, Harmony. She made herself known to me directly and was brought into our sisterhood through her reaction to the intense emotional energies of Tokoyami Toa's cover of the song Error. Harmony looks exactly like Toa. I see more systems VTubing to show themselves to the world as they see themselves, and I want to explore for myself in the future. What do you think the world needs to know about system mates who are like you? First, I will address other systems. The rest of the world can learn by listening in. Persecutors are not evil. We are necessary. We work to avoid problems, not cause them. We don't need your validation to be successful. Non-practicing persecutors aren't any less oppressive. Those of us who have graduated are simply more approachable, not overtly hostile, and open to discussing how to improve our methods, how to up our game. The persecutor card may no longer be in hand, but it is on the table. For people like me, there's nothing but our egos stopping us from making a comeback. We may no longer trade in pain, but that doesn't mean an alternative will be any more pleasant. You may not like how we work, and we don't care. We work when you can't. We work when you won't. We know, are capable of, and are not afraid to use any means necessary to get results. We just don't want to if we don't have to. Some may call it harm when really it's just a temporary discomfort or inconvenience. Time is a more effective grounding mechanism. So I got used to it. We're willing to trade annoyance for boredom. Any harm we cause has purpose and value. It is a means to a positive end that ultimately benefits the entire system. Our work is like the old internet meme, the game. You, members of the system, are winning when you aren't thinking about how you almost went into a crisis 5 months ago and aren't worried about it happening anytime soon. You're carrying on with your life. You're fine. You're winning. You're welcome. This next part is addressed to systems, and I want practitioners working with systems to pay attention because this contains pre-retirement insights. Persecutors have our own value systems. If you want us to help you, learn what that value system is and work within it, not against it. When I was still active as a persecutor, my sisters used this approach with me to remove me as a threat to their lives, and it worked. I didn't have to compromise any of my values or my image, and the outcome was in my favor. I value balance and suffering. I abhor annoyance and boredom. It was by working within my own value system that my sisters were able to make me our sisterhood's greatest defense against rather than the greatest risk of causing it. Within my value system, such an act could be seen as a way of restoring balance, but doing so would permanently relieve my sisters of their suffering without any benefit to myself. I enjoy their suffering too much to ever let that happen. And now, on to the next presenter.
Hi, my name's Lily, and I'm from the L system. We have a lot of persecutors in this system, but I think if you ask pretty much anyone in our at least 140 member system, do you have a persecutor? They'll always say it's blood. So why don't you tell us what the term persecutor means to you? I never really chose the term persecutor for myself. I believe the first 7 people in our system to become selves-aware came across the term persecutor when they were doing their research to find out what to do about the scary vampire lady in their system. Guilty. The advice they got from this research was truly questionable at best. I remember there was a day when the host just came up to me, stood in front of me, and said, "I accept you as a part of myself and I'm ready to heal." And then they were just standing there like they were waiting for something exciting to happen. So I asked them, "What on earth are you doing?" They had read somewhere that if they embraced me as a part of themselves, I would stop misbehaving. But when they came at me with the goal of changing me, or loving me into a more respectable version of myself, I naturally had no interest. They were doing everything common wisdom says you should do about DID, and I wasn't having any of it. Why do you think that happened? We persecutors are very unreasonable, but we always have a good reason. It seems like the widespread belief that we are fundamentally against the system and against any recovery that needs to take place leads both professionals and systems themselves to sideline us in major decisions. If you go back to school, it's our degree too. If you make a major purchase, that's our money too. If you need to recover from something, that's our recovery too. And if you choose not to involve us in these major decisions, we will involve ourselves. And especially early on, sometimes the ways that we involve ourselves are less than constructive. So how do you see yourself as a persecutor then? I'm as much of a persecutor as your uncle is an Enneagram number 5, or your coworker is a Sagittarius. Each of these terms are only relevant within one model of understanding people. In the beginning, my goal was to get my point across by any means necessary. I remember I sort of cast this dark shadow behind our host and became this ominous, terrifying presence who would do who knows what. And the host spent a fairly long time fretting over what this monster could want from them. And then there was this anticlimactic moment where they just asked me, "Are you trying to use the computer?" And I said, "Well, gee, you think? You never let me use it. So of course I've been waiting a very long time." And I guess that's just not the pro-social way to ask for computer time. Well, who knew? I was awful. So awful. But when they needed real advice, or they were in real trouble, or they were about to do something really unwise, they noticed it was always me who stepped in. After a while, they realized they really couldn't do without my guidance, but they wanted to know if they could have my guidance without all of the bonus gifts. And I said, "Oh, I'm truly hurt that you didn't like my gifts. Well, what are your terms under which you will listen to me?" Wasn't one of them be nicer to our Sims? I am every Sim's worst nightmare. I think I offended and terrified the system much more than I ever harmed them, which I think is a lot more common than people realize. Yet nevertheless, the host thought their life was simply over when I surfaced. I'm so tired. I'm really hoping for a normal evening tonight. Where did you come from? Are you gonna ask me that question every time I appear out of nowhere? This cannot be happening. I need help. I really need help. Now, why do you need so much help? It's not to get rid of me, is it? I just want peace. That's it. Is this more peaceful for you? Okay, so that's a really good example of what your relationship with the system was like before. But how would you describe it, like, now? I think what happened was that we realized, okay, you're probably going to have to drop some harsh truths on us. You're probably going to have to recommend or take action that we won't always like, but let's set some boundaries so that we can establish some trust so that it doesn't have to be a giant mess. And I think this is important whether you're working with persecutors or any other type of system member. You have to build the kind of trust that makes it possible to live with the fact that you are not always in control. You know, I actually think that's kind of one of the scariest things about persecutors. It's that you don't want the same thing as us, but as far as most of the world is concerned, you literally are us. Our relationship with one another actually improved considerably after we started spending more time with other plurals, because I noticed that when the system understood that they would all be judged as individuals and not seen as the same person as me, it became easier to let me say things they disagreed with, or do things that were a little weird sometimes, because they knew that our friends who were plural would understand. Wow, that's a really good point. So what's one more thing that you wish the world knew about persecutors? We've had a few people tell our host, well, I wish that my persecutor nightmare could turn out like yours, but you see, blood is just so much nicer than my persecutor. I suppose it could be true if I've never met their persecutor. It's never safe to assume that a system whose persecutor seems a bit too agreeable, or whose overall functioning seems a bit too easy, has always been like that. I want people to consider that if someone like myself is sabotaging recovery, it is our recovery too. And we have a right to voice why we're not feeling right about it. And one thing I hope that newer persecutors know is that it is both possible and okay for other people to like you. And it will happen. So get used to it.
For me, retired persecutor is a somewhat annoying phrase some people in my system have thought may describe me. I believe it refers to language used to describe roles of certain system members by ignorant singlet clinicians who feel the need to classify and describe things they have no business describing. Systems ourselves should be the ones creating relevant language, but that is my opinion. I have little respect for such singlets. That said, I have noticed a pattern among systems that we have met and spoken to. There's often a system member who everyone else regards as frightening, dangerous, untrustworthy, or otherwise problematic. I am this type of system mate in my Plural group. Retired does not really describe my current state. I would instead consider myself to be redirected, which I will explain. Unlike many so-called persecutors I have heard about or talked with, I have never been preoccupied with causing external bodily harm to us or anyone else. Due to our disabilities and medical problems we have faced, I have always felt the area of physical pain and suffering was sufficiently covered. Instead, I have focused exclusively on internal terrorizing. I have many unique powers inside our brain, including control of our imagination to a degree few others have demonstrated, full control of the front, I can kick others in or out and no one can stop me, as well as the power to lucid dream. I used to use them to cause chaos and misery. I would throw frightening scenarios into our mind's eye at any time of day or night. I would take every opportunity to unnerve whoever was fronting so that they were always full of anxiety, slipping in and out of awareness right behind them, whispering threats. I must admit, I enjoyed it very much. I wouldn't say that I feel guilty at all, simply that my priorities have changed. When we realized we were plural about 10 years ago, my systemates realized the impracticality of excluding anyone from the new system government, and reached out to me. They claimed they wanted to befriend me. At first, I did not believe them, but I soon came to realize they were genuine. This did not particularly sway me. Instead, I had an important realization. If I cooperated, I could gain more power within the system. My life might become more interesting. I might find new challenges that would actually test me, and I could gain the right to spend time interacting with the outside world, something I had rarely experienced. I chose to remake myself for entirely selfish reasons, and I am fine with that as well. Though I have developed a certain affection for my system mates that feels new and a bit strange, I did not begin that way. I used a small ceremony to change my own appearance and energy to be less frightening and more compatible with other system members so that I could expand my power and create a more interesting life for myself. However, it wasn't this ceremony that really changed my viewpoint. Over time, slowly, I began to like them. I think it was a result of interacting with them in a new way that wasn't based on fear. I also became more and more invested in our life outside of our brain, because I was taking different duties in the front, developing my own outside relationships, and caring more about our circumstances. I became invested in us at some point. My sense of self-preservation, which only applied to myself, became a sense of selves-preservation and came to encompass the rest of them. Now I protect them with the same fierceness I have always felt about myself. I now channel my considerable power into things that my systemates actually appreciate. I protect them from nightmares and regulate intense emotions. I do not create chaos internally or attempt to threaten and frighten the others in my head anymore. Instead, I now run a team of system members who shift and alter our dreams to prevent nightmares or, if necessary, fight creatures within the nightmares to help my system realize we're dreaming, wake up, and feel safe again. I also regulate feelings of anxiety and rage, preventing everyone else from becoming overwhelmed in our daily life. As I am quite practiced at causing these emotions to unnerve people, I am uniquely suited to regulate them when they naturally occur. I also take the front in emergencies, such as driving in severe weather or when we must do something very triggering like go to a doctor. I have recruited and trained numerous system mates to assist me with all of these tasks, because it is really too much to do alone. I am still somewhat feared in my system because I like to have long teeth and claws in the headspace, and because everyone knows I am, at my core, still the same person I was. But I like it that way. I want to be feared and respected. I did not have to sacrifice that aspect of myself in order to be redirected away from harming the system. Do not try to change who we are. Simply offer us a way to be that makes better use of our powers. Redirection has been very good for me. When I think of my life before, it seems so limited, controlling the same dreams and making the same threats, not caring about anyone or about our life. How horribly boring. Offer us something we will perhaps actually want in exchange for our cooperation. My system mates often say I am a huge asset to the system and have made our current level of functioning possible. We are not to be locked away or discarded. It will not work, and it will make everything worse. We must be bargained with on our own terms. We deserve life as much as anyone else. Do not expect us to apologize or to atone for past actions. It is not necessary in order to move on. To clinicians, stereotyping us is tiresome and will not earn our respect. I have developed a close working relationship with our current therapist because he is smart enough not to insult me with disrespectful language and assumptions. He has listened to my concerns and treated me like a person. This is important to do with all types of system mates, including the scary ones. We can be very useful or very difficult, depending on your approach. In conclusion, I would like to extend solidarity to others like myself. You are real, and you are deserving. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. Now we invite questions and discussion in the chat until our time is up.